I was in the Home Office, which was at the moment of the 9/11 attack in the United States, and all we had to do with that. But actually, in the end, what lasts is the things that change people's thinking, and that's what I was trying to say in the speech, really. And the best way of doing that for me was not to preach, actually. I've done a bit of preaching, haven't I? But not to preach, but to just show that it can be done. And in that way, to try and nudge people. Everybody loves, in the UK at the moment, the nudge theory, in terms of how people's attitudes and behaviour changes. So that was that.
Thank you. I have a microphone that works now. Thank you. Thank you for that answer. So, when you were standing for election yourself, what obstacles did you face? What challenges were there on the campaign trail?
I think initially, when I was standing seeking to be nominated by my party as a councillor, it was just practical things. People asked, I was very glad they asked me the questions, because the worst situation is where somebody's got something in the back of their mind that is a blockage, but they won't ask you about it. So you can't explain how you're going to get over it, what you're going to do. Somebody said to me, well, there are really practical things, David. You know, like if Mrs. Jones's drains are blocked, what do you do? I said, well, I won't put my arm down. You know, I'd ring up what was then the Public Health Department. The name's changed, but there it is, and I'd get something sorted for us. So it was a simple question, a misunderstanding. People, when I was seeking to be an MP, were really reluctant to ask, how are you going to manage the volume of written material? Because that's a really good question for a blind person. How are you going to manage? And of course, in those days, we used old-fashioned cassettes. I still use them, actually, because I like them, as well as beginning to get into the 21st century with digital. There was no computerization. Computers have been transformational for all kinds of reasons for people with disabilities. Still a long way to go, because the way that they're designed is often appalling. I've got a really old-fashioned phone. If I can find it, I'll show it you. It's one of these old Nokias, because they're dead easy to use. Yeah. The iPhone is a nightmare, even with the Siri function. So it was literally saying to people, I know what I can do. I can't drive a bus or fly a plane, although eventually people will be able to, although I certainly wouldn't fancy flying with a blind guy in the pilot's seat, honestly. You can't always rely on technology. But you know what you can do, and you know what you can't do. And you need to be engaged. That's really what tonight's about, isn't it? You need to be engaged with the process. So it's co-production, co-delivery. It's people being partners in this venture.
Thank you. So we have a situation in Jersey where we have an election next year, a general election, and we're slowly moving towards parties forming, and perhaps that may eventually end up as a full party political system. What advice would you give people who are forming parties right now?
Yeah, but be careful you don't form parties because it seems a good idea to form parties. Only form parties if there's a genuine value-driven difference that actually can then highlight genuine democratic participative differences of view. I only say that because I addressed the Association of Local Councils last week, which is parish and town councils, some of them quite large towns that have subsidiary councils in the UK, and very few of them are divided on party political lines, although that doesn't mean that there aren't people who are members of parties standing, but at the particular level you need to get it right for yourselves. Right, the answer to the question, don't stand unless you're going to stand for everybody. Don't stand, I mean, seeing you've asked me, I'll be controversial. Don't stand on a disability platform. Stand on a platform for the people that you want to vote for you for every aspect of their lives. One part of that will be equality in relation to diversity and inclusion. So it will be for some it will be a more critical part than others, but you're standing for what you stand for, who you are, and what you will do. Have courage to do it, but don't expect people to give any inch because you're disabled, because they just don't. Politics isn't like that, and nor should it be. We don't want to be patronised. It's not about paternalism, it's about giving people a chance.
Yeah. But how does everyone encourage people with lived experience to stand for election? How do
well,
we...
those around them, don't just encourage, but say, we'll be there with you for the difficult bits, for the canvassing of people. A lot of it's telephone and online now, but in my day, you went up people's driveways or up the stairways and you knocked on doors. That first dog of mine, Ruby, became schizophrenic. We were going in and out of doorways and passageways. Took me months to stop her going in doorways and passageways instead of straight down the road. And people do. They need a lift. They need a car. They need help with the technology. So everyone can be part of the team if the person concerned is willing and confident enough to let them be part of it.
Okay. And people that are building manifestos and parties that are considering manifestos, how do we make sure that those manifestos are inclusive? And I know you partly started to answer that question earlier, but how do we make sure that it falls into party thinking?
It isn't as easy as it might seem. I'd like to just say that in the campaigns that are being run, all those who have an interest, not just people with disabilities who have an interest, challenge the candidates and therefore the leadership, if you have groupings or parties, as to why not? Where is it? Why is it missing? What's wrong with you that you haven't seen the unseen? And that's part of it. Secondly, building up to it. Part of tonight is just that. It's about raising awareness. Awareness comes in all kinds of guises, in all kinds of ways, and you can do that in the months ahead so that the awareness campaign becomes a natural part of what people are offering when they stand for public office next year. I think that would be a great thing to do. So it's a rolling programme, a rolling campaign. But also, I think there's one other aspect that you could put forward, and that is, alongside the election, you could get people, this is none of my business at all, but you could get people to run their own little referendums on building on the research that Stuart's built on tonight. You could put that research out there and make it part of the campaign. And of course, once people are in, that's not the end of it at all. That's the beginning. Then you've got to hold the feet to the fire.
Okay, and just finally from me, before I open questions up to the floor, what's the way back for Labour?
Long and hard, I fear. I mean, we got ourselves in a terrible mess, as we did in the 1980s, and I was leader of Sheffield when we lost the 1983 election with a 144 seat majority for our opponents. And I'm in the House of Lords when we lost the election in 2019 by 80 seats. So I've been through it again and again. The truth is, anyone's only electable if they have two things. They have something that makes them worth voting for, and they don't frighten the electorate to death that what they stand for and what they want to do is so alien to the majority of the people they're talking to. And if you get those out of juxtaposition, then you're not going to win. So for the Labour Party, it's not simple, because let me just be, can I just be political for a second?
Yeah.
We have a quite remarkable Prime Minister. You couldn't have a more disastrous position at the moment in the UK in all kinds of ways, partly following our departure from the European Union. And nothing sticks. I mean, nothing is making a difference at all. And it's because we have a Prime Minister who is a paramount showman. He knows a little bit. He's not Donald Trump, don't misunderstand me. He wouldn't be leading an attack on Westminster because he'd lost an election. But he is a little bit like Donald Trump in the sense that he rides over everything. So if you present Boris with a fact, he'll just say, well, it's not really important. It's not really important. And he does it brilliantly. So people out there say to me, and they say on our television and radio, they say, well, it's not really his fault, is it? You know, he's only Prime Minister. It's nothing to do with Boris. It's a brilliant technique. We don't have it. And we're going to have to find a different way of winning over people to the things we stand for, and the fact that what we stand for is them. And unless we do that, we'll lose again.
Okay, thank you. So I believe we've just got time for one question from